All right, yield nerds. I thought I would take inspiration from an all time amazing movie, Braveheart, to give us all some direction on what we can do, or at least I'm going to do, between now and the X date of June 1st that has been announced. So, the way we're going to structure this is to look at the background and see what we can do and kind of relate it to Braveheart. Welcome to new subscribers. There is a how to navigate the channel video that you can look at. There is also a roadmap called the Income Investing Roadmap. The link to finding it is right here. You can look at that. My usual disclaimers: this is not investment advice, it's education. You make decisions. I'm telling you how I'm preparing. I am not a wealth management advisor. I don't have merchandise to sell, and I'm not endorsing product or politics. All right, here is how we're going to look at today's content. We have give or take 14 days to the X date of June 1st. So we'll look at what that background is and where the two parties are in discussions. And then we'll draw inspiration from the movie Braveheart and look at a specific moment, the Battle of Stirling, to be precise, and ask the question, what did William Wallace do? And then look at the banking system crash. What did we learn from how the government responded? And what does it all mean for the next 2 to 4 weeks? So, the background, this article is from a day ago or so. It literally says we still believe the US is on track for a June 1 default without a debt ceiling hike. So, what does that do? That's a Reuters article. So, we play the game of odds. What are the odds that between now and June 1, there will be a perfect 1 year or 2 year solution where the debt ceiling discussion is punted until after the next election? In my opinion, very, very low, for the simple reason that it's not good politics to take a really big problem that people care about and just say, the end, the problem has been solved. Unfortunately, we don't exactly have cooperating parties, so the odds that the problem will be completely solved is very low. What about a crash and burn and the economy goes to pots on June 1? Very unlikely that the government is going to stop paying treasury bills and shut everything down and say, aha, I got you. And party one tells party two it's your fault, and party two tells party one it's your fault. And we just, crash the US dollar. That is also unlikely. So, where is it likely to go? If we played the game of odds and thought through in terms of common sense, the most likely thing that could happen is there is some kind of a deal on May 30th, and the both parties say, well, I didn't want to do it, but I'm doing it for the country. And the other party says, well, you are terrible, but I'm going to do this for the country. Both of them can claim victory, prevent the US from a default, and give it breathing room. And July 15th is an interesting date, and we'll talk about why in a second. June 1st, the odds of there being some kind of a yield event is pretty high. I say that for the simple reason that it's unlikely things will be resolved well before that date. And so there is some level of market panic, which will set in right around June 1st. So if we rewind to episode 65 and ask the question, what is special about July 5th? We had a discussion about what is the real default date. On June 1st or shortly after June 1st, it's highly likely national parks are going to close because we can't pay national park employees. There are some securities related cash holds that will start moving around. Government savings and investment plans will start moving around. We may move money from one bucket to another to make room. There are treasury exchange stabilization fund movements that will be done. All of these are small potatoes movements that will happen. But the real source of cash, unfortunately, would come from furloughing federal workers so we don't have to pay them. And that is likely to create a big stir. There are estimated tax payments that are going to come due June 15th, and there is also securities that are going to mature of about 100 something billion right in the middle of the month. The reality is, if we had some kind of a breather from June 1 to June 15th, it automatically will lead to a longer breather for another 3, 4 weeks. So the most logical thing that will happen is both parties say, they try to take credit and they give it some kind of a gasping room for a couple of weeks. We sputter on until the middle of June, take the estimated cash, take some of the reinvestment of securities, and say we can go until the middle of July now, but now it is a real problem and there is more turmoil. That is more likely. And to figure out what to do when crazy things are happening, we're going to go to about 800 years ago, the Battle of Stirling in Braveheart. What did William Wallace do? Now, that is not William Wallace, and that is also not Mel Gibson, the movie Braveheart. Obviously, there are copyrights around them, so I found copyright free images of the best things since that movie, and so we're going to go with that is Braveheart. So, what did William Wallace do when everybody thought the forces of the Earl were much stronger and they were coming at him with armor? And William Wallace had to think through, how do I respond after making all the preparations? You may remember he had his own folks go find long stakes. He had his own folks devise a way that they were going to walk away so the English would think they have a weaker army. And William Wallace, and this is about as cheesy as eel nerds ever get, but William Wallace got on this horse with blue face paint and rode back and forth in front of his army and said, yes, you can run. Yes, you can convert all your money to cash and not invest in the market and run. But you're not going to do that. And here comes the invading army, the Earl, here comes economic uncertainty. You can sit here and say, oh my God, what am I going to do? This looks very, very scary. And instead, what he told his own ragtag group of people, and that's also not an authentic screen image, but it's copyright free, so bear with me. What he told his ragtag army of people was that we're going to make these really long stakes and we're going to crouch on the ground and we're going to wait until the moment is right. Hold, hold, hold until the moment is right. And my message to you is hold, hold, hold again. The most likely scenario that I'm preparing for is to just accumulate cash balances. Those of you who are fortunate enough to accumulate a cash balance north of $250,000 in a single bank account, watch out. The FDIC only insures up to 250. So to the extent that you have an excess, you may want to keep parking it in multiple banks. And even in that scenario, read the news, see which banks are deemed too big to fail, and make sure that you accumulate your cash only in those banks. You could, I suppose, go buy 5.5% yield to maturity treasuries today that mature shortly after June 1st. The only thing is, if you look at what that yield really is for 3 weeks, it's less than 0.5% in nominal value. What do I mean by that? If you bought $100 at 5.5% yield to maturity and kept it for an entire year, it becomes $105.05 before state tax. That's the 5.5% yield to maturity. However, if you only kept it for 2.5 weeks, it barely is going to make 50 cents. Given all this economic uncertainty, is now the right time, with only 3 weeks to go, 2 weeks to go until June 6th, is now the right time to buy it. You make the decision. I am not doing that. I did buy some treasuries that matured right on June 8th, but that was a couple of weeks ago when it was meaningful, somewhat meaningful to hold it for a month. Today, my instinct is to just accumulate cash. There will be debt ceiling jitters as we get closer and closer to May 30th. There is an FOMC meeting on June 13th, depending on what deal is struck on June 1st. The FOMC, this is the federal chairman, Chairman Powell, will decide to tinker with the federal funds rate in one way or the other. So, given the debt ceiling jitters and the short term interest rate changes, if you kind of look ahead to June 15th, one of three things could happen. There is some kind of a temporary deal, the market panic is gone, and Chairman Powell and the FOMC decide to increase the rate. That would push rates to 5.75%. Who wouldn't buy it? Sweet deal. I would buy it starting June 15th, but accumulate cash between now and June 15th. There may, unfortunately, in all likelihood, be an equities crash, if indeed there is no deal or there is an oxygen gasping moment where there is some level of extension, but the extension is not good enough, at that point, I would probably look at value investments right around the middle of June. If for whatever reason rates crash, agency bonds, and you may remember the previous episode, have some very interesting high yield opportunities. They are callable bonds, so you have to be smart about which ones to buy. So that to me is my decision tree, and this is my plan for going into the battle of sterling, if you will. And so wait, accumulate cash until May 30th, and wait to see what happens and not make rash movements right now with just 2.5 weeks until the X date. What did we learn from the banking system crash? When there was a real threat that Americans would line up in front of the bank and take all of their cash out, the government said, no, 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 the banking system is too important to the country. Some banks are too big to fail, even if we originally did not say that. And even if the depositor has more than 250K, we're just going to rescue them anyway and ask questions later. So regardless of politics, in all likelihood, the government will not let the country fail its creditors. So I would think there isn't a systemic threat to US treasuries. However, why poke the bear with only 2 weeks left? So my sense is that after much theater, this too shall pass. And what does it mean for the next 14 to 30 days? And that is my crazy William Wallace impression right there. I am not going to sit here with just 2 weeks to go and say, well, I think the Fed is going to increase rates, or I think, there will be a crisis. The easiest thing that we can take from here is the message that William Wallace told his countrymen in the year 1297. Hold, 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 except I'm going to hold cash and wait for 2 weeks. Thank you for listening to Yield Nerd. Have a wonderful day.